Hi, so on to our next guest now. We have Rob Greenwood from eXate, who's going to be talking to us about data privacy at APIscale. Hi, Rob. Nice to see you here.
Hi, Alan. How are you?
Good. Thanks. Good. Are you ready to go?
Ready to go when you are.
Perfect. You're looking good. Have a good one.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Alan. Hi, good morning, everybody. I'm going to make a very quick apology to start off with. There are transitions in this deck, and apparently they don't work over this platform. So you're going to see a few things pop up probably before I actually wanted to tell you these, but please bear with me. It's not fully expected. Anyway, I'm Rob Greenwood. I'm here today to talk to you about data privacy at APIscale. And this is something that I've been very involved in over a number of years. And I thought it was just interesting to talk about some of my experiences and really what I've seen over the last few years. Sorry, next slide. So very quick introduction to me. I joined the IT industry in 1990 as a Kix COBOL DB2 programmer. I haven't got all the white hair, not yet anyway. Became involved in building systems around reusable patterns very quickly. I've always firmly believed that reusability is the key to being a happy programmer, and I've always been disappointed by the frameworks and the complex realities of what we've had over the years. I've worked in many different technology roles, predominantly in financial services, but really between 2016 and 2021, I designed, built and ran the Fidelity International API program in many roles within there. Recently had a spell with Swift, who I'm sure everyone is now aware of, as an API product owner. Thank you, Alan, for bigging up API product owners earlier on. And I joined eXate, my current organization, in November 2021 as the Chief Product Officer, with a big focus on API data security and privacy. Okay, so this is one of the slides that you should have seen appearing before you. So I think it was quite useful to really sort of try to highlight why I think privacy is so important in the API world. So you've probably read ahead already, but in October 2020, the ICO in the UK found Marriott International was in violation of GDPR regulations. The consequences were a fine of £18.4 million. That's what they paid fundamentally. In September 2018, BA suffered a well-documented cyber attack that allowed hackers to harvest customer and payment data. You've read ahead already. British Airways received an initial fine of £183 million. That was the biggest fine that had ever been levied for this type of breach. It was reduced to 20 million. That's still pretty eye-watering, right? Plus the reputational impact of BA. In my opinion, BA has never really got over this breach. And apologies for a little bit of plagiarization, but I thought this was just such a good comment from yesterday's keynote that, you know, we think about those numbers that we've just seen on there, millions and millions of pounds. But by the end of 2023, 60 plus countries will have adopted a GDPR-like regulation covering 2/3 of the world's population. That means almost 2/3 of the world's population and data being held by you, by me, by anyone on these people that is breached could trigger fines to those magnitude. That's a huge risk that's starting to come along, and it's only 18 months away. Okay, so I thought it'd be quite useful to go through sort of my journey, and unfortunately the transitions aren't working quite right, so we'll have to slightly adapt here. But if we go back to my early days in the API world, it was easy, right? We got an API gateway. We had a consumer, we had a producer, and it was great. We had a couple of APIs, something that straddled the network. Suddenly I can talk north-south without opening iRules and do all sorts of things. And it's great, happy days. We've now opened up a secure, approved channel between our web applications and our data producers. And we've got a couple of APIs, a couple of security APIs. Absolutely brilliant. And I'm there on the left overseeing this. I can see what's going on. I can see the data going through there. Many calls rising daily. Fantastic. What a great story. We've ticked the API box and I'm in full control of what's going through it and who's seeing what data. We then come on to API 1.5 and this was again a bit of a darker time for an API product owner, we've realized the power of the API gateway, and people want to do more. This is great. I don't have to do iRules anymore. I can put a proxy in my gateway. I can link my UK customers, my US partners. We've got SaaS products coming in, things like Salesforce, Workday, all these SaaS products that are out there. I'm sure you're all using, and we're great. We're moving to cloud, and this API gateway is something that's it's game changing for us. It's absolutely game changing. But the problem was we didn't really have the governance. So what's happening actually south of the gateway is we've got all these services beginning to appear. So we've got service B, we've got service A, we've got service C. And not only have we got service B and A appearing, but we're getting slightly different variations of those services appearing. So B1 suddenly appears, which is a slight variation for a slightly different use case of B. We've got A1 and A2, which fundamentally are the same thing. Let's call it a customer, for example. But one may be in one geographic region, A1, and A2's a different geographic region. So we've got all this great stuff going on, but we're uncontrolled. And our consumers and producers are expanding at a rate of knots. And it's becoming harder and harder to see who's using what data. And my sleepless nights are starting to become a little more frequent. So API v2, it was time to take back control and think about API governance. And how did we do that? Well, we introduced our common service definitions. So not only have we got all this stuff appearing at the back, and it's ever expanding, this is just relaying what was in the last slide, but we've got to start looking at our, it's essentially our products, data products, if you like. So we need to represent A. A is a customer, for example. And when a customer comes in, a UK customer, consumer comes in and wants to get a customer, they should see a simple, logical representation of what our customer looks like, what our organizational customer looks like. We let our gateways and we let our services decide what part of the business or what geography should be servicing that request for that customer data. But as a consumer, you just see our representation of it, our common service definition of customer. Same with US partners, they will want certain information, so let's got transaction lists, anything like that. So they want a representation of transactions, SaaS products, and so on and so on across the estate here. Our common service definitions are hiding the complexity behind our gateway, and we're regaining control. We've brought partial discovery back in. We haven't put full discovery here, but we can find things now. We can find what a customer looks like. If I'm looking to use an API for a customer, I look for a customer, not a customer because it's Wednesday, or a customer because it's Hong Kong, or a customer because it's Tuesday. I've got a level of discoverability now coming into my platform. We're also creating governed APIs that are easier to use. So when you come in as a UK customer, north of our gateway, you see a common representation of customer. There may be some nuances for certain geographic regions or business channels, but fundamentally you see a customer. And you're going to get it consistently. You're going to get the error handling done consistently. You're going to get the security done consistently. Everything's consistent. Everything becomes easier to use. And once again, I appear on the left-hand side of this diagram, and suddenly I'm a little bit happier because what I'm seeing now are common service patterns between our consumers. And I can understand now what the consumption of our consumer is, what our service patterns giving them, and what potentially may or may not be a good idea to be sending or displaying in these patterns. So then we start to come to V3. Now, I tend to call this architectural utopia. And architectural utopia, according to the books, everybody loves this diagram because it's where everybody wants to be. It's where everybody thinks they need to be. Now, I love this. Don't get me wrong. I love this pattern. I love the fact now that my entry point to my organization is a discovery service. I can come in, I can ask the discovery service, where is customer serviced from? Well, that's easy. Customer is serviced from the micro gateway at the bottom left there, and B2. Great. Please route me there, create my security, get everything ready for me, and secure my connection between these two services and serve data. So this is wonderful, because all of a sudden I'm now looking at this and going, fantastic. My common service definitions are easily findable. The discovery service knows where to service those common service definitions from. There's no manual proxying, there's no manual routing. Suddenly I'm in a much nicer, happier place with regards to the architectural setup. But the problem at this point was I'm starting to lose full visibility of the discovery and what's using the services. I'm now getting to a point where machines are requesting that I want access to customer, and my discovery service is helping you get there and creating the authorizations allowed to do this. I'm starting to lose that visibility again, and my sleepless nights are starting to go up again, because my discovery service is potentially starting to allow connections that I'm not fully aware of, and my common service definitions are allowing that to happen. So my lovely architectural utopia is actually starting to give me a bit of a risk here that I need to try to plug. And and I have this question of who or what is approving the use and access to this data. Say sleepless nights are starting to come back again. So what would I have done differently if I'd had my time again? I'd have gone right back to API v1, and I'd have started talking about data security and privacy at that point. And I'd have started looking at something that looked like this. And I would have been starting to consider abstracting my data privacy laws and my rules and data security rules away from my core service. But my core service should have data privacy and security just wired into it and built into it. So my API gateway would be engineered with the data governance rules and data governance policies and compliance policies engineered into it. Now that'd be abstracted away to a separate system. That'd be linked to my corporate data model. That'd be linking into all these tools. But fundamentally, I would have put the pattern into my API gateway at this point that said, we will have on the ingress and egress of the API gateway, this application server, whatever it happened to be, a check that is going to look at our data distribution rules and act on that accordingly. And it's going to give me a level of comfort. Now, at this point in my life, I probably wouldn't have known what all those rules were. But the fact I was thinking about the pattern at this point is the important part. I'm thinking that at some point, this is going to get difficult. I'm no longer going to be in this world where I understand the consumer 110% and I understand the producer 110%. It's going to grow out of my control, which leads us on to V3 plus data security. So if we think we've gone through the other steps that I showed earlier, this is where we ended up. This is what we ultimately wound up with. Fundamentally, every egress and at every point, we could inject governance into that process. And that governance was able to check against, for example, cross-border data protection rules, Schrems 2, GDPR, these types of things. It's also able to look at internal consuming rules. For example, can I supply this piece of data to a tester? Or does it need to be obfuscated before that tester gets it? Can a certain individual within a certain business role or looking after a certain customer see another customer? Do I need to deal with that? Fundamentally, by putting it in at each point of entry and exit, we could start moving those rules away from the back ends here, which is a good thing. When we looked at the patterns of delivering this, we ultimately worked out with tens of millions of dollars to try to change every single back end to fulfill every data security and privacy rule. So it became unrealistic for us to do it. So by fundamentally abstracting that way to our gateways, to our points of egress and ingress, we're able to save ourselves significant time and significant money, and ultimately resulting in less sleepless nights for me. Okay, so I work for eXate, and the process that I just showed you there, it fundamentally is based on these vast principles. The idea that it's got to work as an ecosystem, it's got to work as part of your ecosystem, much like linting, it's part of your ecosystem that we just touched on, much like product management, it's part of your ecosystem. Data privacy and security has to be part of your ecosystem, or it has to be embedded into your ecosystem. It's not just a design time thing. It's got to happen all the way through. So our view of this is that we have this fast analogy, where we say we want to be able to find your services, much like the linter there. We want to be able to use your OAS specs. We want to be able to locate your services, and we want to be able to inspect them. We want to be able to know what they look like in design time and execution time. We can analyze those, and we can say fundamentally, these are the data attributes. This is the consumption pattern. Basically, this consumption pattern plus these attributes are risky. Are you sure that this consumption pattern is what you require? So, for example, national identifiers crossing geographic boundaries. So we can analyze, we can find that. Fundamentally, then we can solve the problem. So by embedding this in our gateways, we can automatically act on the data that's coming through. We can say, well, actually, national identifier shouldn't be going to Rob because he's a tester and there's no reason to get a national identifier. So we can obfuscate that, we can take that out, we can encrypt it, all sorts of things. So we can solve real time based on our analysis. And of course, most importantly with all this, continually testing. It's no good solving it once, because you know what, another consumer will come along in another geographic region and that needs to be addressed. It's sort of become risky when we're all aware of the various sanctions and risks that are going on at the moment. So we need to be able to continuously adapt to that. And I think one quote that we had, I don't like doing quotes too regularly, but and this is Gartner back in before 2022. Fundamentally, API abuses will move to the most frequent attack vector. I think we had an interesting conversation the other day where we said part of the problem with some of that statement is there's been no big ticket breach yet that's highlighted this. There are a few, they're out there, BA, Marriott, but there's nothing that's really gone, wow, we've got to do this, but it's coming. Okay, so to just sort of finish up, we've got a few minutes left. From our perspective, my perspective, from what I've learned in the industry, you've got to have effective analysis, protection, and monitoring of the data flowing through your APIs. You've got to know what's going through. It's great when you've got one or two APIs and you've got the tick in the box. And when you get to V3, 2.5, V3, you've got a monster and it's growing, and you've got to be able to control it. You've got to have a full audit of who is accessing and who is blocked from accessing data. If the worst happened and you did send data out incorrectly, you need to know why, who, when, what happened, how are you going to fix this, and how can you shut it down as fast as possible, and learn from the mistakes. The full audit is so important. We need to create transparency on why data is being used and for what purposes. It's no good saying, well, somebody came in and they requested access to our customer database, and the auditors go, well, why did you give them it? So, well, because they got an API key. So, the regulator's not going to touch that. So you need to be very clear why data was being used, why it was given to someone. It was given for testing purposes. It was given for transaction analysis. It was given for big data analysis. Why did you give this data out to this person or this service that requested it? Safe data sharing with third parties, both large and small, by applying policies and rules on all data ingress and egress. So we've touched on that already, but we're living in this world where data is the commodity, right? We need to share it. We'll share with our big clients, we'll share with them, but we talk about, for example, the climate change session that we heard earlier on. That ability to share data has got to be there. Without privacy and protection, companies are going to be more reluctant, to do this. So we've got to think about this. We need to reuse internal controls and client consent that determines API data access. There's no point us going away and designing something in isolation around our APIs that isn't linked to our compliance models, to our corporate data models, and so on and so forth. There's no point, because you'll end up with duplicated effort, and one will get out of sync and what have you. This is about how you get the organization protected, not just the technology. So this has to link in with what you've already got. And I think probably most importantly, and last, but for me certainly not least, is you've got to automate and embed data protection and privacy at the gateways. If you try to bolt it on, fit it in. You do it as an afterthought. Things will be missed, things will be reinvented. It's got to be consistent, and it's got to happen all the time. It's not something that stops. It's something that has to be there constantly, and constantly looking for these threats. Okay, I think that's by me. It didn't take 20 minutes yesterday. I'm pleased I managed to hit 20 minutes almost on the dot. Thank you. And any questions?
Very, very professional. Well done. Well done. So yeah, nice presentation. We do have a question in the chat, but kind of just from my side first, to play a bit devil's advocate, right? You know, if I'm an organization, I've just paid hundreds of thousands or millions for an API management system from one of the big names out there. Why do I need a solution over the top of that? Surely, you know, I just paid all this cash. It should be enough, right?
Yeah, and I don't want to be down on any of the major gateway providers here. I wouldn't like to be, but I think this is an emerging. I think we saw in the keynote yesterday. There's an emerging trend, and at eXate we are talking to the gateway providers, because where we want to be realistically is we don't want to be a bolt-on, right? Go back to that very last point I made. We don't really want to be a bolt-on. We would like to be a policy actually in your gateways that says, great, drag me in, protect, done. You know, so fundamentally, I think that's where we are. We're actually talking with two of the big gateway providers, one huge, one emerging, about this exact topic. So yeah, please watch this space.
Okay, well, that makes a lot of sense. That was kind of also my second question to follow up on, was basically, okay, makes sense. What do you do? What do you do next? And you've kind of just answered that, you know, if it's a policy in the gateway, or maybe you can expand a little bit on like, you know, how you do it.
Yeah, so I mean, we've got a couple of. I'm sorry, I'm assuming you mean in deployment options, Alan. So yeah. So we've got a few deployment options, and I think the key thing is here is certainly our ethos is we've got to be open. So fundamentally we are at the heart of everything on RESTful service, and please come along and try us, by the way. We have a SaaS product you can trial, and please, you know, so we're a RESTful service. So if for example, if you're using AWS, the AWS gateway, we know we're not going to be embedded directly into there as a policy. So we can very easily, we're running Kubernetes. So we've got a Kubernetes deployment plan. It can be run as SaaS. It can be run right next to your gateways. That's where we started. Fundamentally, we've got a number of object models that puts us as close to the gateway or as far away from the gateways as realistically you'd like. But fundamentally, we're RESTful as a core service.
Okay, so you can do a call out on that. Let's go and have a quick look at this question from Christoph. He has said, how can you check data access rules on a given layer if you don't understand the data itself at this layer? This implies that either the data includes metadata or that each layer is able to interpret the data, no?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I mean, you've hit the nail on the head, right? What we do is we operate behind TLS termination points. Obviously, this is why we predominantly say we want to act within the gateway itself, because fundamentally we terminated TLS 9 times out of 10 before or at the gateway. So at that point, obviously we know the data. You like to think, you know, for less sleepless nights, you know your consumers that are sat behind you. And of course, the key thing is here is your gateway knows your, you know your producer, behind south of the gateway, and fundamentally your gateway knows your consumer. You onboarded that consumer, you know what that consumer's doing. There's meta information about that consumer as well that's coming through as part of the call, which is massively useful in making some decisions. But you're absolutely right. Fundamentally, what we do, what our product does, is we take, for example, an OAS specification or payloads. We work with those as well. And what we do is we run them through our, I'm going to use the word AI, but it's a machine learning algorithm that we've trained to look for GDPR data that could be of concern. We look for Schrems 2 data that could be of concern. And by combining that with locales and all the other meta information that we've got around usage, we can start to come up with basically our advice to you. Now, that can either be silent and just advise you, audit it, so you can act upon it later, or we can act on it straight away.
Okay, so a bit of training wheels approach as well there.
Yes.
Hey, perfect. Rob, thank you so much for your lovely presentation, and speak to you soon.
Lovely. Thanks for your time, guys. Have a great day.